Welcome back to Upside Down Data. Let's talk about Render and where the data say it's going next. So Render is an asset that's performed very well this year. We can see even just off of the September lows, it's currently trading 175% off those lows right now. Very impressive. So I think the question is, where might this be going next? Now, of course, with Render, part of the reason why it's been behaving so well is that it fits in nicely with the AI narrative. So Render, if you're not familiar, is basically a decentralized GPU compute network. And so given that GPUs are such a central part to AI, this has that really nice fit, and that's probably partly why we've seen such strength. So what do we think about going from here, though? It's been performing well this whole year. Is that likely to continue, or might it have to slow down soon? So I want to talk about what some of our models are seeing, both in the short term and more in the longer term outlook. So let's go ahead and get into it. So the first model I want to talk about is our short-term risk model, the short-term upside downside potential indicator, or UDPI. So basically higher levels mean higher risk, lower levels mean lower risk. And so what we can see more recently is that short-term risk has started to move up off of the lows back here in September, but it's not gotten to a super overextended area. It's not even as high as this first run that we saw coming into this year, where the short-term UDPI got up to 2.94 at its top here, and not as high as this peak that we had here, this kind of first peak back here, 2021, which is up at a UDPI short term about 2.31, and then of course the top was up right around 5 over here. So this would suggest that in the short term, Render might have some more room that it could move to the upside. It's currently sitting just above 0, and that means that there's clear sky ahead for Render if it wants to realize it. Just to get back up to this prior peak from earlier this year, it's still got a ways to go before it gets up to almost that 3 level, which is where this peaked out. So I think in the short term, it does have more room to work with if it wants to, although it's still at a more neutral stance. Obviously, when you look at this, the time to really be bullish on Render is back over here. Of course, we're not there anymore, but right now we're more at a neutral stance, whereas back here, it was very much more of a bullish stance, or for example, any of these times back here at the lowest points of the scale. So obviously not financial advice, you should interpret the data as you will, but that's what I'm seeing when I'm looking at the short-term UDPI for Render right now. So given that, let's then go and look at some longer term data and see what they're saying. So one thing that we can also look at for Render is our momentum bias indicator, or MBI. So basically this is a momentum indicator, as the name suggests. And so the idea is that if you're in a positive MBI regime, like for example through here, that means that the momentum is very strong to the upside, and any dips just quickly get bought up, move back to the upside. But then when you see this kind of behavior, deep red, or spending a lot of time in the red and not really any time in the green, that's bear market behavior. That's where the momentum is prevailing to the downside, and you'll just go down, down, down. But then notably, there's this period that you often find with assets of this oscillation around 0. And that's more or less what Render has been doing, with some extreme bursts to the upside here. And this is a good sign. This is a bullish sign. This is a sign of early bull markets. And the reason for that is that the scoring of the MBI is actually what's known as a Z-score. So 0 would be the average momentum Render has seen through its life, and that is positive overall. Price is appreciated overall in its life. And then the values above and below are standard deviation units. So 1 would be 1 standard deviation above the mean. And the reason why this oscillation around 0 is a good sign is it means that it's sticking close to that overall positive momentum. If 0 is the average momentum, and that's been positive, then roughly sticking around there would be a bullish thing. It means you're generally seeing positive momentum overall. And that's why in these transitions out of bear markets into bull markets, you'll see this type of behavior. And then ultimately what you'll see eventually is going off into one of these big bull off top type of moments. And so that is kind of the current regime. This is very much a early bull market type of behavior. And this is not just something you see with Render. You can look at the Bitcoin chart, you can look at the Ethereum chart, pretty much any chart you can think of, just go look at it. You'll see these types of behavior. The bull market, the bear market, the transition. Over and over and over again, you'll see it every single cycle. So that seems to be where we are with Render right now. Certainly a good sign in the long term. Now, the final thing that I want to show here is our long-term upside downside potential indicator. So again, risk model, but this cares about moves that play out over months to years, so a bit longer in its time preference. And so even if we are in early bull market, as the MBI seems to be suggesting, that doesn't mean that it's just going to be up only. Obviously, with markets, there tends to be a lot of volatility. Even just looking at render, look at the extreme swings as it went to get to its all-time high. We tend to just gloss over that when we look at past price history. We just think, oh, bull market, things go up. But you forget all the pain and all the volatility to the downside that can come during those moves. So we're seeing right now on the long-term UDPI for render is it is getting a bit hot right now. It's up all the way at 2. And so what that might just suggest is that kind of from a longer term perspective, things are getting a bit overheated. There is still more room to work with to the upside if render wants to here. You know, we're not at 5, we're down at around 2, but we are starting to get a bit hot. And so it wouldn't surprise me if render maybe has more short-term upside potential to realize, as we were talking about here, if it finds some resistance somewhere up around here soon, and then has to have a correction. But importantly, if we really are in an early bull market, those corrections might just be a massive opportunity to load up before the next leg up. And that's really the difference between a bull market and a bear market. In a bear market, when you see any kind of positive price movement, that's a point where people just take every advantage to just dump the asset, and then there's not that demand to step in and catch it before it just keeps slicing lower and lower and lower. But in a bull market, it's a different dynamic. You'll move up, you'll get overextended, things will kind of crash down, but then you'll have people willing to step in and start buying, which then ultimately sets the stage for that next big leg up. And so if we do see this top with render, and if we really are in the early stages of a bull market for crypto, that could just mark a massive opportunity if we see a notable correction off of a high risk level. So obviously not financial advice, and time will tell. We're gonna have to see, obviously, if we have a recession or something like that, that could derail the early bull market crypto thesis potentially. But if we really are there, and the data certainly currently suggests that we are, then just the way that we think about some of these things changes. And the way that we think about those corrections changes. And the way that we think about high risk also changes. And in some ways, high risk just might mean that right now might not be a great time, but then down the road, before too long, a better opportunity might come in to load up for those who had missed out on the earlier runs. So time will tell, but those are some of the things that I'm looking at with the data. So if you want to view live data from our models and more, you can do so at our website, claritydigital.io. Link is in the description. And of course, if you like the content, remember to give the video a like, follow us on X, a lot of updates about our models and more over there, and subscribe to the channel.